States remember David Frost for the famous Nixon-Frost
Yeah.
debates, but he was, in his time, exceptionally important. He actually reminds me, temperamentally, from reading your book. By the way, the book is called So Anyway and is available in stores. But he reminds me a bit of Bob Hope.
Oh.
In that Hope never had a bad word to say about another person, was endlessly enthusiastic,
Yes.
relentlessly, tirelessly working,
Yes.
and had a great need for approval.
Oh.
And he strikes me the way you described Frost, but you had a wonderful experience with Frost over 50 years.
Yes, I was very fond of him. My first year at Cambridge was his last year, and he liked a bit of material that I'd written, including that thing I did actually just now about BBC. And he asked me, he said, can I use it in the end of term review? So I sat in the audience terribly thrilled that this big star at Cambridge was using my material. And then he went off, and within 4 months, he was presenting the most startling television show that's ever happened in England, because as a result of Beyond the Fringe, the one I was telling you about with Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, 4 months later, the BBC started doing satire on the television. And although Moore and company, the Beyond the Fringe crowd, had changed London with their satire, it had never been seen, of course, outside London, and suddenly there were jokes being made about the Queen and the Prime Minister, and the place was it was extraordinary how it changed the atmosphere, and suddenly we were in what everybody thinks of as swinging London of the 60s, and it just happened in this very short period of time where all that excessive deference and politeness was suddenly thrown out of the window, and where the class system we thought was beginning to collapse.
Yeah. And Frost saw in you a writer for him and for material for the show, but he also started to put you on camera.
Well, he saw me when I did the Cambridge Review at the West End at Shaftesbury Theatre, when it was actually transferred to Broadway, where it only lasted 3 weeks because we got a very bad review in the New York Times, good reviews everywhere else. He came and saw those shows, so he knew that I was developing as a performer, but nobody else in England did. So it was the most extraordinary thing that happened to me, was that after I'd finished with the musical, I tried to be a journalist with Newsweek and failed. And I was basically sitting in New York thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And David phoned, and he had always kept in touch with me a bit, and said, I'm doing a show for the BBC in the new year, a sketch show, with 2 people you won't have heard of, called Ronnie Corbett and Ronnie Barker. Would you like to be in it? And I thought, is he talking to me? I said, yes, please. He said, simple, they called my flight, got to go, bye. And that was it. So this man just plucked me out of utter obscurity, you know, as a sort of unemployed actor in New York. Suddenly, I was on national television, 1966, performing Thursday evening at 8:30, live to 14 million people, which is the most frightening thing I've ever done in my life. I can't tell you how terrifying it was. Just extraordinary, because forgetting your lines, there's no feeling as humiliating as forgetting your lines. Not getting a laugh is pretty bad. That's why comedians talk about dying. Actors never talk about dying, because you feel as though you're dying when you go out there to make people laugh and you fail. But the worst thing is just forgetting your lines. And one of the shows, I forgot my lines in the sketch. I said to Ronnie Corbett, who's this tall, I said to him when I was ad-libbing, I think you must be the tallest person I've ever met, which rather confused the audience. I was supposed to say, I think you must be the shortest person, but I was. And after the show, I remember getting home and just breaking down into tears, because the stress of and I had so little experience, you see. But David was always there and tremendously supportive of me. And you were absolutely right. He never had a mean word to say about anyone.
And he also had a great eye for talent, because on the Frost Report, where you were a writer-performer, were Eric Idle.
Yes.
And Michael Palin.
That's right.
and Terry Jones.
Terry Jones and Graham Chapman.
So the beginning of Python really comes from David Frost.
Yeah, that's right. Well, 5 of us write on the writer's table for David Frost for that show. And then when the show finished after 2 years, we won a big international trophy, and there was a lovely photograph of us all. It is funny to see 5 Pythons already working together.
Yes.
And then he said to me, he wanted to give me my own show, and I said, well, that'd be great. And he said, who do you want in it? And I said, I want Graham Chapman and Tim Brooke Taylor. And he said, of course, anyone else? And I said, yes, I want Marty Feldman. And Marty had been working on the writer's table with us because he was the script editor, but he wasn't a performer in those days. Isn't that strange? He didn't perform at all, he was just a writer. And David said to me, but he's not a writer, he's a performer. And I said, David, trust me, he's going to be a wonderful performer, trust me. And David looked at me and said, but what about the way he looked? Turned out not to be a disadvantage. And after that series, Marty went off to the BBC and did his own show, and then he came to America with Marty Feldman's Comedy Machine, I think it was called, and then he linked up with Mel Brooks and did Young Frankenstein and Silent Movie. And I can say I discovered Marty Feldman.
Yes.